Today's podcast sponsor is Huber Engineered Woods. And I want to talk to you about zip sheathing and why we use zip sheathing. I know you've heard me talk about it on the podcast before, but I thought let's just lay it out in the simplest of forms. Number one, when I install it properly, I tape the seams, I liquid flash the seams, I manage for water with my windows. I use their products. I don't have to worry about water. There are times when we install drywall inside of a house and we don't have cladding on the outside because I know zip system is going to be waterproof. So that's number one. Number two, I can manage for air. So using zip system sheathing on the walls, my last 5 houses we built were all below passive house levels of air leakage. They were all below that 0.6 ACH50. And we're not putting that much effort into air sealing. We're just making sure that we tape well, which we manage for water, we manage for air. And the last 5 houses that I built all had Zip R, because that continuous insulation that comes adhered to the back of my zip sheathing that I'm already putting up and installing, now I have continuous R value that I get the whole R6 or the R9 or R12, whatever it is. I don't see building any other way. It works for us. It can work for you. Make sure you go to huberwood.com and check them out. And Huber, thanks for sponsoring the podcast.
Hello, Unbuilded Podcast. Steve Basic here. Jake Bruton. Peter Yost.
Hello.
Hello.
We're here for another fun day at the Unbuilded Podcast studio. Today, hopefully you're excited, because I am. We're going to talk about...
I can tell from your voice.
That's what I have to deal with. Today, we're going to talk about builder or manager, and basically the trades. You know, there's certainly a lot of chatter out there, shortness of trades, which I probably agree with. I don't think there's probably enough talent in that talent pool. But one of the questions that I've always had is, in dealing with high-performance homes, you know, when I started out, say, 30 years ago, believe it or not, I actually worked for a carpenter for a while. And the carpenter there, the guy that owned the company, had a tool belt on every day, and he would meet the trucks when they make deliveries, take his belt off, handle the delivery, and then put his belt back on. But we also did all of the framing. We did the finish work and trim work in the project. So, you know, the guy in charge, Mike, had a really good handle on what was going on. And
he was very present.
Very present and pretty much totally in control, because everything went through his ears, eyes, and hands. But today, it seems, you know, when I'm dealing with projects, that things are a lot different. You know, I'll meet with a company owner and he'll sell the project. And when they get awarded the project, chances are I get attached to a project manager.
Yep.
But the project manager isn't really out at the job site doing the work. You know, we have a site guy, site super, that's in charge of the project out there. And, you know, some of them do some work, some don't. They're more of managers. And then they turn around and manage a whole series of subs that would include framers and trim carpenters and specialty guys. I mean, trim carpenters these days even get broken down to, you know, stair guys and the people that do windows and baseboard and doors, or just do cabinets. So, you know, there's the opportunity there for a huge disconnect, right? That if I have a detail or a concern about a project, well, I tell the project manager, he tells the site super tells the framer tells the guy that's actually going to do the work. And it reminds me of that little, you know, school game in kindergarten where telephone where you whisper an idea or sentence into someone's ear, and then we all laugh because by the time it comes out 5 people later, it's a totally different story.
And you got that one jerk kid that does whatever he wants.
And yeah, you got the one jerk kid.
Which is the same as the job site.
But it's that idea that, you know, years ago with my buddy Mike, someone gave him or had that conversation with them, and it went right to the person that was going to be dealing with it or overseeing it. Now it goes through a series of hands, and I'm just questioning: is that better, worse? Does it matter? How do we deal with that?
Well, let's start with the potential positives then. If I have a guy on site that all he does is install cabinets, chances are he's really freaking good at installing cabinets. If that's all he does every day, his tool setup is tuned specifically to that, his skill level is tuned specifically to that, and he's seen every possible problem that can go wrong with installing cabinets, and chances are he has a method for dealing with it before it becomes a problem.
I would agree with that. But what when you're trying to introduce a new air sealing detail?
Yep.
That nobody has seen. So the cabinet guy, I agree with, but that's a pretty easy one to justify.
That's why I picked it.
Exactly. Right. The harder one to justify is, or even better yet, say we're trying to do something with the HVAC contractor, right? That by the time it gets all the way down to the guy that's doing it, is he getting the same amount of information that I gave to the project manager?
Yeah, he's not.
Yeah.
And you have guys show up on site that don't even look at the plans.
Somewhere it's getting filtered down through there. And then when it comes back up, the other problem is you go to the job site and you say, hey, this is in the wrong place or this wasn't done right. Now you have to spend all that time going all the way up the chain of command to try and find out where the loose lips were that changed the idea, and then we have to sort it out and go back down the chain of command and try again, right? So it just seems like it takes a lot of time, and it's just one of those things. I mean, there's people out there that say, "Oh, we're losing our craft," right? And which is.
Maybe not.
And I don't think we're losing our craft. I think a lot of people are forfeiting the craft in favor of other things.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm saying that you have the opportunity to do as much as you want if you're the owner of the company. But if you choose to be more of a manager and less of a worker, then I think you're forfeiting.
Do we lose something?
Right. And I mean, that's a choice you're making, right?
So that's a yes and a no, right? Like if I have 10 houses going at once and I have 10 project managers and I, as a really good, high quality business owner, have hired people that are better than me to project manage, then potentially those guys are on site enough that these disconnects don't happen. The problems don't happen. Their knowledge base is better than mine. Like there comes a point where, well, that's my transition in my company, right? I grew up in a business where my dad was the guy that you're talking about. When deliveries showed up, he was there helping us unload. And when the truck went away, we all put our tools back on and we went back to work. And my entire life growing up in the business, my dad was on the job site every day. We ran one job at a time for the most part so that he could just be on that job every day. When I took over the firm, the same thing happened. For the first 5 years of me owning the business, I was on site every day and doing estimates in the morning or in the evening after my kids went to bed, doing the books after my kids went to bed. And I truly was like, okay, I can't take the company any further just on my shoulders. We have to figure this out. We have to expand. We have to become something different. Right. And exactly what you're talking about happened. I hired 15 people. We were running a 6,000 square foot addition and 1,800 square foot addition and 2 bathrooms at once. And none of them were being well taken care of because we weren't paying close enough attention. And I had good site guys, but they weren't incredible.
Right.
And it took me a while to notice that. And now we've reverted back to, I do wear my tool bags maybe 1 or 2 days a month, but I'm on the site every day with my guys, with my crew.
I mean, it's probably very true of architecture offices too, that at some point, if you choose to get big enough, then you forfeit doing some of that design work or some of the detailing work in lieu of trying to manage the 12 projects you have in the office, instead of the 2 projects that you would have had when you were doing that work. And I'm not saying one is worse or one is a better. It's just, I don't know.
How do we consider this?
How do we consider this? And, part of it is I just did a large project and I kind of circumvented the owner and project manager and just dealt with the site super most of the time.
But that's a relationship that you've built over a few projects, right?
Yeah, and he was it was really good because then we could get stuff done quickly. He could get answers to questions very quickly, and I was assured that what I was asking for was getting done.
But then you're basically talking about your and I's relationship, though, too. While I'm not on every job all day, I am on every job every day, and I'm close enough tied in, right? So there's this happy medium. Potentially.
Yeah. Well, and it's there as we progress too. Like I see other people. I just recently met a builder in the Southwest, and it's like he almost was like graduated as a businessman and figured, you know what, I'll get into this building thing, and he has pretty much no knowledge of building. He understands how to run a company. That's pretty evident. But, it's one of those things where building has only gotten more complicated in the last 20 years. And it seems like we're not appreciating that complication.
Yeah, society views what we do as a bunch of rednecks on site smoking cigarettes and nailing boards together, wherein it's way more complicated than manufacturing widgets or, making soda pop. It's way more complicated than lots of things that we do when you look at the nuts and bolts of it, and we don't treat it like that for some reason.
Right.
Well, this makes me think of...
Hey, Peter is here.
This makes me think of the program that actually you and I worked on together for Ibicus in the Building America program called the Scopes of Work. And the idea was if we've got all this specialization and we need to connect their work, how do we do that? And one of the ways is to have scopes of work for each of the trade contractors that are connected.
That's what we do.
And NEHB had a program. It was Lindsay Davenport who wrote it. She was quality control for a production builder out of Atlanta, and she wrote a book called The Scopes of Work. And the key elements of her program were that every sequential trade contractor had to have a checklist to go into their work and to exit their work. And every subsequent trade had to sign off at the beginning of their work that the previous one had completed their work. And, it was a really interesting quality control program. And in the beginning of the book, she said, you either do this program or you don't. There's no halfway. You have to commit to the process. And the second thing is you're going to have to fire at least one project manager and at least one trade contractor as part of this process because they're going to resist. So what does it have to do with Building America? What we did was Building America said, take that Scopes of Work program and make it high performance. So what did we do? We went in and connected all the building enclosure and mechanical system contractors. And you actually worked and developed details for this. And we made all of the sign-offs performance tests. That's what was lacking from the Davenport program. And interestingly, I actually wrote to her to get permission to use her program. And she responded saying, well, you bought the book, right? And I said, yeah. And the Scopes of Work book is this, paper-backed, but in the back, in a sleeve, there's a CD with all of the scopes of work. And she said, well, if you bought the book and it has the CD with it, you of course have the right to modify
you have a license.
You have a license to change it because that was the whole idea. I wanted people to customize their scopes of work, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And she didn't know anything about high performance buildings or building science, but she said, I'm delighted to have you use my framework to incorporate that. So we I worked on that program, and that is still available on the internet. I wrote a blog for Green Building Advisor, and we put in all the scopes of work that Steve and I had created into that.
I guess, that certainly helps solve the problem, but it doesn't change the fact that this guy is a guy that went to business school and came out and said, okay, I'm going to choose building as my business to manage.
Yeah.
And if I try to have a conversation with him about flashing, it's not a conversation, it's an education.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what you're saying is the derogatory term is the keyboard contractor. You know, the contractor that sits in the office and doesn't understand what's happening on the site.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's like if I can't have a legitimate conversation with the owner of the company, then what kind of conversation happens on the other side of him?
Better dang well be somebody beneath him
That's
that
what I was
has
going
the
to say.
power to control quality.
If he's a good business person and he wants to get into high performance, he's got to be smart enough to know, hey, I shouldn't be talking to Steve. I should have somebody.
Well, in this particular case, he's going to sub he's like a one-man show that's going to sub pretty much everything out.
So
But it's
that is a challenge.
How does
because
he-
he's the quality controller.
right. And then he's going to look at me and say, well, you know, you're going to have to help us out with the framers and stuff. And it's like, well, it's not my job to educate your subs, even though I can provide some of that help. But it's like there's a disconnect, discontinuity or something there that it makes it a challenge right from the start, as opposed to the other project that I just spoke of where I'm talking to a site super who's one of the most intelligent builders I've ever met.
Yeah.
And
Easy.
so,
He's allowed to take things personally because occasionally you do too.
no, I never take anything personal.
And occasionally he's insulting.
I'm never insulting.
Also, so
My eyebrows are.
This is a. My wife the other day drew her eyebrows on very high.
It's just because she knew she was going to be astonished by you anyway.
I'm
Right?
kidding. So this is the reason that I have not adopted the term general contractor, even though that's technically what I am. I still like the term builder,
Interesting.
and it's just a nomenclature thing. It doesn't really impact anybody else's opinion of me. Probably, I probably don't care one way or the other whether or not I call myself a builder or a general contractor. But I like to think that I still build things. I don't just general contract everything. And so builder for me makes me sleep better, I guess.
I mean, we do have the opposite problem that people who go into the building industry, they like to build stuff. And so when they get into a situation, this happened all the time when I was building in Seacoast, New Hampshire, that there would be these guys or gals that realized I can't make enough money off my own labor as I get older. I'm going to have to change from a builder into a business person.
Yep.
Right. So the opposite is true. We have people
And that
that
recognition comes late.
well,
too.
and they're great builders, but they have no idea how to run a business.
Yeah. So I have a friend that's a builder not too far from here. And we have conversations that there's two of them that own the business and they have a couple employees. And like, I'll talk to him on a weekly basis. And he's like, I'm finishing up this thing that my guys got wrong yesterday. I'm like, why are you doing it? And he's like, well, I need to make sure that's done correctly. Okay. First of all, they should have done it correctly. And if they didn't, why aren't they there? Well, it's just faster for me to go ahead and get it taken care of. Okay. But they didn't learn anything for next time. First of all, Second of all, is your time really best spent fixing laborer mistakes, or is your time better spent managing people that are fixing that and managing the business and working on growing the business? And, you know, and he's substantially older than me. And we talk about like, yeah, I don't make a living off of my back anymore.
Yeah.
And he still really enjoys the idea that he makes a living off of his back, but he openly acknowledges that there's a clock.
Yeah. So, Steve, you said that this really good business person who happens to be a builder, that you're going to work with him to make sure that his trades get it right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know how we do that, but he's going to operate
You charge for it. That's
as
how.
a general. Well, yeah, I mean, but he's going to work as a general contractor. So when he hires the framer, he doesn't have the education
Well, I'm just
to
surprised,
help
given
the
that
framer.
the best use of your time is as an architect, not as a building coach, right?
Yeah,
So,
I mean, part of it is trying to get the plans and the design to a point where we're doing things that are common enough to that framer that conversation is short, sweet, and it works. But I just used him as an example that there's this huge disconnect, that there's people in the industry now that have taken over. And I mean, a couple of years ago, I worked on a project with the homeowner GC'd it, which was a catastrophe.
it's another topic.
Yeah, that's a whole nother
Just
topic.
don't do it.
But they hired a
Just say
framer.
no.
They hired a framer that the lumberyard suggested. Well, the framing company consisted of one guy in his Escalade that drove around and managed 3 different crews.
Oh boy.
Right. And the 3
Kind
different
of want an Escalade.
and the 3 different crews, the crew that we had on the house, they didn't even speak English. They had one guy that was acting as interpreter, but he was there like half the time. And if I didn't catch the guy in the Escalade, then I had to rely on the interpreter. If I didn't do that, there was a whole lot of hand waving.
Yeah. Yeah, that's hard.
And I mean, it's.
I'm just picturing Steve trying to get over a language barrier and like screaming, like, "No, here!
Oh yeah,
here we put it here."
And
No entiendo.
They had like 8 studs in this wall, and I think they were at 8 different lengths, honestly. And it had a big bow on the top. And I was just trying to show them, like, I had to go in their trailer, get out a level, and yes, it was exactly like Jake said. It was pretty much a catastrophe. But what I do remember is the guy getting a step ladder and a full sized sledgehammer and like hammering the one that was high. Like not taking it out and cutting it, but just hammering it down and then smiling and saying, okay,
That's how framers. Yeah.
okay, it's all fixed.
But we can really quickly say if you're going to try to contract something for yourself, number one, chances are you don't have the knowledge. Don't be insulting to my profession and say, well, I've done a lot of this when I was growing up with my dad, or I worked 2 summers for a framer, so now I know how to build a house. I've been at this 25 years and I learned something every single day. Mm-hmm. So there's no way you have enough knowledge to do exactly what we do. You might be able to doggy paddle through it and it'd be okay at the end, but you're not going to do what we do. Second, anybody you're going to hire does not give a crap about your business, because your one house is not going to float their year, but the 10 jobs that I'm going to send them will. And they'll sure as hell answer the phone and show up when I get upset, but they're not going to do that for you.
Yeah.
Those 2 things alone are enough for you to go, stop.
Yeah, home GCs
just stop.
I always.
If you're passionate, ask the builder how you can be involved in a productive way.
So I have another GC horror story, homeowner GC, right? And the husband and wife were there. He's talking about how he's going to GC the meeting or GC the project, and it was a substantial project. And I looked at him and said, Pete, I said, no offense to you, but today's meeting, you showed up an hour late. You rescheduled it 3 different times to get here. And this was just one meeting with me and your wife. How do you think you're going to manage 10 subcontractors out on this job with your job? Mm-hmm. And immediately the wife went into the I told you so, like just ranted on him. And Steve is right. I told you so. I told you can't. He still tried to do it. Right?
For how long?
He did it through the whole project. But we went through 3 framers, 2 electricians. I think the plumber was like the only contractor that started and actually finished.
He's got a boat payment.
The project. Yeah, he's got a boat payment. So he's got something to worry about. But yeah, that was a horror show. And the homeowner, he was not a good listener at all.
It's a big pet peeve of mine, and it really pisses me off when people are like, oh yeah, if I had more time, I could do this myself. There's no other profession. Like, you wouldn't go to the vet and be like, I know how to do this. I'm just letting you do it because you have the right tools. I didn't want to have to buy the tool. Like, how insulting is that? And for some reason, society's okay with it.
I remember showing up at that job after they were getting ready to put the siding on, and along the windowsills of every window, they stopped the vertical furring strip and put a horizontal one in.
Nice.
Yeah,
so I asked the siding guy, I said, he goes, that's to hold the trim.
Of course.
And I was like, okay, but we have this whole sloped sill that's supposed to drain into these cavities, and you just ran a dam across it, across all 65 windows. So what do we do now? We have to tear those out. And of course, the homeowner's like all frustrated, and I was like, Pete.
It's not on the plans.
In the plans, it shows that open.
So, but to sort of bring this back around to the whole issue of people who are head of building companies that don't know enough about the trade or the craft, right?
Or let's say I don't think it's don't know enough about it, but having come up through the craft.
Interesting. Okay.
Right? Because I think those guys, and that's probably true of any business, right? I mean, if you're the owner of the grocery store and you started out as the bagger,
Yeah.
You're going to have a better knowledge of the
understanding
inner workings
of a grocery store.
Yep.
So are we advocating for, I mean, we need training programs for high performance across the board, but maybe we need one that's designed for people who are great business people, but need to learn more about the building process.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of that, I can't imagine some of that inadequacy of education doesn't drive the cost of building that house up, right? Because somewhere the general contractor has to put in some kind of money because he knows somewhere down the line things ain't going to go right. Mm-hmm. And he's going to have to fix it, change it.
He's going to do everything he can for that to not be his pocket.
And not to be his pocket, but then that means that the framer is probably putting it in his scope of work or something. But somewhere we're paying for those inadequacies up front, right? The homeowner's getting the price to build this house that has some of that money built into it too. Yeah, it's just, I always, I think about it a lot, and you see a lot of guys driving around and they just comment about this and that. And it's like, I don't think you, Mr. Contractor, would actually know how to cope a piece of crown molding or install it properly. But likewise, I would probably venture to guess the guy that I do know that can cope that crown molding to look like one piece folded in the corner probably doesn't know how to run a business to save his life.
Yeah, that's the tension. Yeah.
Right? So that's the challenge, is that you have these two worlds that need to interact. Most of the time they're headed up by two different people, and they're very rarely the same person. So.
Yeah, and I wonder when we do, say, home building crossroads training, how many times we get people in the room that are the head of a building business, don't have much understanding of the building process. Are they lost by what we cover in, the home building crossroads?
I bet a lot of times they are.
Yeah. But
because I've sat in some of your guys' presentations.
Are they going back to their office and saying, oh yeah, all that stuff Peter talked about, that's good marketing stuff for us.
Ooh,
so they don't see it as an advantage to good building.
Yeah.
They see it as a marketing opportunity to their business. And, I can see that happening very, very easily.
It's funny because we know that, from our work in the Building America program, that in order to build high performance homes, you have to be able to sell high performance homes. So we did trainings for sales staff, because it's a different ballgame.
Yeah, that's just a whole nother, like realtors, how they ruin. We should do on how realtors ruin the building industry.
How about how realtors ruin everything?
Looks like we struck a nerve
Sorry,
here.
all you realtors out there.
Yeah.
Find another podcast to listen to. Not welcome. No, that's take a hard line.
How to increase your numbers.
Realtors.
But anyways, I don't think we're going to solve it, but I think we've made some really good points and brought some things to light, at least in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, it's not as easy as some people make it out to be. Let's try our best to have the right people involved so that there's a knowledge base for checks and balances.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So
trust but verify.
With that, any parting condiments, gentlemen?
I like ketchup. Did you say condiments or compliments or comments?
That wasn't even, so it wasn't funny. It was a total waste of my time. It totally sidetracked me.
Did you forget what you were?
Sometimes I think I'm supposed to do the adult supervision here, and I'm totally inadequate.
No, just because you're substantially older than the rest of us doesn't mean you have to be the adult.
Thank you.
Age doesn't mean you're smarter or better. It just means you're older, much older.
And that the amount of time you spend stretching in a day is double.
I'm not even going to say it.
Okay, send us home then.
All righty. So there you have it. There's our little talk about builder or manager. And thanks for joining us on the Unbuild It podcast. Hit that subscribe button. Go tell, I know I said go tell 2 of your friends last time, but tell 5 of your friends now. And tell them to hit that subscribe button. Go look for all the other opportunities to learn on the Unbuild It show. We put up a bunch of videos. We have some great stuff. Peter's got all his wing nut testing. We're videoing and we're throwing it up there. It's just unbelievably good. So go check those out. And until next time, thanks for joining us.
See ya.
Have a good day.